OnePlus smartphones are known for three things: fast speeds, a clean OS, and an underwhelming camera. We get sent a ton of smartphones here, from Samsung to Google to Xiaomi, Huawei, Oppo, Redmi, and way more. And pretty much every single time, I end up using a Samsung as my Android phone of choice. And that's because Samsung phones have an outstanding camera, great performance, and there's really nothing to complain about them. However, I've always wanted to use a OnePlus device as my main phone, and don't get me wrong, I've already done that multiple times before, but after just a few weeks of use, I always found myself switching back to a Samsung, mostly because of the camera being far superior. OnePlus have massively improved their cameras with the OnePlus 8 Pro, to the point where it was almost as good as Apple's or Samsung's, but it was never quite on par. Well, now OnePlus has partnered with Hasselblad to create their best camera yet, and although this partnership has been hyped like crazy, at the stage it is right now, it is quite underwhelming. And here's everything you need to know and my experience and thoughts on the brand new OnePlus 9 Pro and the OnePlus 9. Okay, so in case you haven't heard of Hasselblad, they're one of the world's pioneers in terms of camera technology. Their camera was even used to capture the very first photo on the moon as part of the Apollo program. Becca from The Verge did an amazing video recently where she took a look at a $6,000 Hasselblad camera, so I highly recommend you guys watching that video right here. So when OnePlus announced their partnership with Hasselblad and even sent us this super exciting media kit with a photo of the moon presumably taken with a Hasselblad camera, I was so excited. Just like you, I was under the impression that this was game-changing for OnePlus. Initially I thought that this phone would feature the most insane level of zoom on a smartphone, or if not that, at least a unique camera sensor developed in partnership with Hasselblad, or at the very least a custom lens made with Hasselblad. But no. None of that happened because the only involvement that Hasselblad had was in terms of the color science. What this means is that Hasselblad has worked with OnePlus to make the colors of the photos that you take way more natural, but that's pretty much it. OnePlus did tell me that they do have a 3-year partnership with Hasselblad, and that in years 2 and 3, they will have some actual hardware, but for now, they only have the color science. So now you're all probably wondering, is this a big improvement then? Well, I'm sorry to say that it's not. You see, when users complained that OnePlus cameras were bad, they pretty much never complained about the colors. Like, the main issue was the poor low-light performance of the sensor, as well as the poor image processing, which resulted in a lot of noise and a lot of softness in the image in general. No one really complained about the colors, but OnePlus decided that they had to fix the colors apparently. Unfortunately, this doesn't even work as it should, as by default, when you take a photo, it won't actually use Hasselblad's color processing, but OnePlus's instead. So the only way to actually use Hasselblad's is to switch to the Pro mode and then take a photo from there. Which is pretty bad because most people would just use that default camera mode, especially when you have a fast-moving subject and you want to quickly take a shot, you don't want to go through modes just to get the right colors. Okay, so not only is Hasselblad's involvement so small, but OnePlus is pretty much hiding it in another mode. So the real question is the color science that, you have to go through so much trouble to actually use it and find it, is it good? And I would say yes, kinda, as you don't get that blue shift that you normally get with the iPhone in a lot of the photos, so I do like that. But I also found that the shadows are usually quite deep to the point where the phone ended up using a lot of detail. And I'm not sure if this is a glitch or not, but in Pro mode, even with everything on auto, it tends to blow out the highlights like crazy to the point where I'm just better off shooting in the normal camera mode. So therefore, the only way at the moment to take good advantage of Hasselblad's color science is to switch to Pro mode and then take a photo with full manual controls, save it as a RAW file, which you would then edit. Quite a hassle if you ask me. Now, OnePlus did tell me that they do plan on bringing Hasselblad's color science to the main camera mode, but we don't really know when that would actually be. So until that happens, Hasselblad's involvement is something that the majority of you would never make use of. Okay, but does this mean that this is a bad camera? Not at all. So I do think that they do have some really good hardware now. So this is a 48 megapixel sensor with 4:1 pixel binning. It's a Sony sensor, IMX789. Now, it's not as big of a sensor as on the S21 Ultra, for example, but it is a bigger sensor than on the iPhone 12 Pro and the 12 Pro Max. It supports 12-bit RAWs, which is pretty impressive for a smartphone, as well as 4K at 120 frames per second and 8K at 30. You know, Samsung phones have had 8K video since the Galaxy S20 line, but it was only at 24 frames per second, and I also believe that the frame rate actually dropped lower than that as the footage was quite choppy. But this one's super smooth, which I do like, and that 4K 120 is also really nice to have for when you want to slow down the footage. The ultra-wide camera is now a 50 megapixel sensor, which is 3.2 times larger than the sensor in the iPhone 12 Pro Max, the ultra-wide sensor, and that really shows. Like, it captures way more light, the images are sharper, and this is actually a very impressive ultra-wide sensor. It also uses a freeform lens to correct the distortion through hardware rather than software, and I can confirm that this actually works pretty great. My only complaint with the ultra-wide module is that it's not actually as wide as the competition is, which is a bit of a letdown, but other than that, this is a very good ultra-wide. Macro mode is still here. Unfortunately, you cannot get quite as close as with that microscope camera on the Oppo Find X3, but it is still a very good macro camera as it's actually using the ultra-wide module and then autofocusing with that. So it's super sharp, 50 megapixels, and it's pretty good in that case. Now, the telephoto module is pretty disappointing. So it's just an 8 megapixel sensor, and you only have 3.3x optical zoom, which is still better than the 2.5x on the iPhone 12 Pro Max, that's for sure, but it's nowhere near as good as something like on the S21 Ultra, which has 10x optical. We also have a fourth module, which is a monochrome sensor, which I'm not even gonna talk about, as that's, yeah, it's pretty much useless. Okay, so the camera doesn't need to have some good hardware. We just need more improvements in terms of software, particularly the ability to use Hasselblad's color science by default. But for now, if you're willing to accept the camera compromises once again, then you should be glad to hear that the rest of this phone is pretty much perfect. We still have a 120Hz Quad HD display, only that this time this is also an LTPO panel, which not only means that it can go down to 1 Hz to save battery life, but we also get the second hand on the always-on display, which is pretty cool. Now, this display can go up to 1300 nits of peak brightness, it supports 10-bit color, and it is also one of the best displays that I've seen on a smartphone. Not quite as good as on the S21 Ultra, as that one is slightly brighter to 1500 nits, but this is still an A+ display. Performance is also top-notch. We have the high-end Snapdragon 888 processor with up to 12 GB of RAM and up to 256 GB of super-fast UFS 3.1 storage. Like, this phone basically screams with these specs, and alongside that 120Hz display, it is honestly the fastest feeling phone that I've ever used in my life. Absolutely incredible performance. But I think that what impressed me the most about this phone was its charging speed. For a few years now, OnePlus phones have had an insanely fast charging speed, but now it is absolutely ridiculous. So the OnePlus 9 Pro can charge from 1% to 100% in just 29 minutes. That's faster than what most phones take to charge to 50%. And not only that, but if you buy OnePlus's wireless charger, you can wirelessly charge the 9 Pro from 1 to 100% in just 43 minutes, which is faster than, again, what most phones take to fully charge through cable charging. OnePlus achieves this by using 2 battery cells which charge in parallel. And with a already pretty good battery life that this phone has, well, battery in general will never be an issue for you. Also, I forgot to mention, the back of the 9 Pro looks absolutely stunning. The one that I have right here is the Morning Mist color, but what's super surprising about this is that it barely catches any fingerprints. And overall, this has got to be one of my favorite colors ever on a phone, so pretty big fan of this. Now, aside from the OnePlus 9 Pro, we also have the regular OnePlus 9, which surprisingly has pretty much every single feature of the 9 Pro, with the exception of very few, one of which being the main camera, which is slightly worse. The display is a bit smaller at 6.55 inches and with a 1080p resolution, and you're also lacking the telephoto module and the monochrome sensor alongside 4K 120. But I mean, other than that, you still get 8K video recording at 30 frames per second, as well as the exact same super fast charging and wireless charging too, albeit at a slower 15 watts. We get the same Snapdragon 888 processor, the same 12 GB of RAM, the same storage, even the same battery size alongside that 120Hz refresh rate. So I would really say that a OnePlus 9 is already a very good phone, but the 9 Pro has a few extra features that some of you might appreciate. Now, at the time recording this video, we do not know the prices yet, but I would say that for the OnePlus 9 Pro to be a good deal, it should be priced at about £750 in the UK, maybe 800 at most, as the S21 is already 770. And for the OnePlus 9 to be a good deal, I believe it should be priced at around £550 to £600 in the UK. If these phones are priced more than that, they're still good, it's just that they won't be as good of a deal as they could have been. But let me know in the comments what do you guys think about the OnePlus 9 and the OnePlus 9 Pro. What are your thoughts on the phones in general, and especially the Hasselblad partnership? Give this video a like if you have enjoyed it to let us know, and definitely subscribe if you want to see more in-depth tech videos like this one hopefully was. I'm Daniel, this has been Zen of Tech, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Zen of Tech, signing out. Cheers.